This is the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Hello, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. And today we have some really great news. We have a very dear friend, probably the most popular guy in at least in my genre of macroeconomics over YouTube. And we've been a friend for a long time now, and it's George Gammon. And he's the only guy that Peter Schiff is jealous of because Peter's a friend of ours. So Peter can't understand why George has more followers than Peter. So anyway, and so it's going to be a very interesting show because this is a very exciting time. So any comments, Kim?
Well, George produces the Rebel Capitalist podcast, so listen to that. Listen to that podcast. It's excellent. But the funny thing is, we get in the studio and we're ready to start the show, and we're just talking. What about this? What about this? What about this? So this could be a 25,000-hour show with you, George.
Well, there's so much going on.
Oh man,
Yeah,
we're just
there
going to
really
scratch
is.
the surface. So welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. We're so honored that you came to the studio.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited. It's great to be here.
I was going to say, there's three.
So you do not have a permanent residence. You travel from city to country constantly.
Yeah, I mean, it's technically Puerto Rico, but I've spent a lot of time in Medellin, Colombia since 2015 because I've got a team of people there. We do a lot of real estate investing. But I'm agnostic. I just go where I think I'm going to enjoy spending time. And like our mutual friend Andrew Henderson says, you go where you're treated best.
Yep.
And I think you need, especially today, you need to be very flexible with your residency, where you live. And there's a lot of stuff that's going on in the developed world. And I think that if people aren't cognizant of that they could be a victim and not even know what hit them. It comes very fast.
So we need a place to start in on. So George is from Portland. Kim is from Portland. And Kim and I lived up there in Portland for a while. And he was, all we saw was a rioting on the screen and all this. But you were back there before the rioting started.
Mm-hmm.
And would you mind explaining kind of the culture of what was going on in Portland prior to the rioting?
Yeah, well,
at Starbucks, I think you were at.
Yeah, it sure was nothing like when I grew up. I mean, that would not have flown back then. But basically what happened is I was there for a few days for a friend's birthday. So during the day, I was going into the local Starbucks, a few of them downtown in nice areas, and just trying to answer emails and get some work done. And this was maybe 3 years ago or so. And there's a lot of homeless. That's the first thing that struck me when I went there from the airport, is just the amount of homeless. I mean, there's just camps. I mean, they're lining the sidewalk. And I guess there's, back when I was growing up there, that would not have been allowed. But now I guess it's allowed. They can just go wherever, and they can. I mean, it gets very unsanitary as well because they're not only living there, but they're using that as their facility if they need to use the restroom, or it was right out there in the open. So that's the first thing that strikes you. But then you go into the Starbucks and you're like, okay, well, at least maybe here I'm going to be kind of left alone. But sure enough, they're coming in, they're using the restroom. And when I was there, they're coming in to use the restroom to shoot up drugs. And they would be in there for a half hour. Then as soon as one person left, the next person would come in. And you really didn't even have an opportunity to use the restroom. And the employees there were scared to say anything or to kick them out because they knew that the police wouldn't back them up. And then at Starbucks would have to go through this big PR nightmare if there was an altercation. So what ends up happening is if someone came in that was just completely belligerent or just whacked out on drugs, screaming, just who knows what they're doing. And I saw this right in front of my eyes. The only way that you could get them out is if the patrons just stood up and said, hey, some of the guys in there like myself that are maybe a little bit bigger say, hey, buddy, you got to hit the road. You got to get out of here. And you would have to be the Starbucks bouncer, if you will. And when I was there, I had to kick out at least 2 or 3 individuals that were quite literally scaring the people in there. And that's what Portland's turned into.
So anyway, Kim, you grew up there, right? What was
I
it
did.
like when you grew up?
Oh, it was like
It's a beautiful city.
Mayberry RFD. It was Opie Taylor. It's a beautiful city. When I was there, it was a beautiful city, very safe. Never ever felt fear being downtown. Downtown was a beautiful redeveloped area. It was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, especially in the summer.
And we still have a condo up there.
Yeah.
We had bought our first house up there, and so we love Portland. So when I saw it burning on the news, so it's interesting that you're from there.
Yeah.
But that's what we're going to get into today is kind of what's behind all of this disruption in the economy and homelessness and all that. But George, please give us a little background of how you came to be here. I understand you're a Rhodes Scholar and A student in high school.
Not even close. I almost flunked out of high school. I think that's something that yeah. So you were able to accomplish a lot more than I did in high school. You were able to actually flunk out and make it happen. So we have that in common. But I've always been an entrepreneur, and some of the things I did worked out. Some of them didn't. You just kind of shoot first and ask questions later. And I'm definitely guilty of probably having a little bit too much confidence in my own decision-making ability. And I retired in 2012. And I had kind of had enough. I wanted to explore the world and maybe have a little more freedom.
How old were you at 2000?
38 years old.
38.
Was it primarily real estate that allowed you to?
No, I'd never been in real estate.
Drugs.
No, yes. Yeah, at a bouncer company.
He was in Starbucks selling.
Bouncer for Starbucks. Yeah, exactly. No, I'd never been in real estate. I was just an entrepreneur, just started businesses. And
what kind of business?
They're usually around sales and marketing. The last business I had was a convention business where we do these large conventions 3 to 4 times a year, maybe 5,000 to 6,000 people.
I'm glad you're out of that business now.
Yeah, you know what? I was thinking about that the other day when this whole thing hit with the virus. I'm like, boy, if I'd still be in that business, I'd really be struggling right now.
We know
some of friends
that are that's their business is big seminars all over the world, and they are dead in the water right now.
Yeah. So in 2012, retired, and then I needed to figure out a way to invest my own money. So that's when I went down the Milton Friedman rabbit hole and Thomas Sowell, who are my 2 favorite economists.
Thomas Sowell's the greatest, boy.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Jesus.
Absolutely incredible.
African-American economist who says it like it is.
Oh, to say the least. Yeah. That's for sure. And then I started studying Jim Rogers and Mark Faber and Jim Rickards, a lot of the guys that, a lot of your buddies. And that kind of took me to the philosophy that I wanted to buy things when they are cheap and sell them when they're expensive. Pretty straightforward. And so that took me to real estate in 2012 because it was extremely
timing was good.
Cheap. Yeah. I looked at a chart going back to 1900 and it went all the way down to its historic trend line. So I knew that was the time to get in. So I've been investing in real estate ever since.
Where?
All over, but initially in the United States, in the Midwest,
cities?
Kansas City.
Kansas City.
Yep, Kansas City.
I was just there last week.
Yeah, and then now I've been doing it in South America, but I'm definitely a real estate guy at the core. But like where I live, I'm agnostic. If I see stocks or bonds around the world that are cheap, I'm happy to go in there and start kicking tires. That's for sure.
You were talking before we started the program about Dubai as a real estate play. You think that's a good place to be?
Yeah, because they've just been crushed. Their real estate market peaked out in 2015.
Yeah, when I was there, I told them that, man, this baby's coming down. They go, no, real estate always goes up,
Yeah.
Burj Khalifa and all this stuff. I said, no, you guys don't stand too close to that building.
It's a highly cyclical market,
Yeah.
but now it's been going down for several years, and there's a couple.
By the way, those are the floating islands you guys see on
the palm. Yeah, you got it. So you've got a couple things there. Their real estate market's been in a downtrend, a severe downtrend.
I told them.
In addition to that, then they had oil go to negative $40 a barrel, so that wasn't good for their.
Wow.
Well, back in that was just
right.
in the States here, but that didn't, like Jim Rogers says, not like you could buy gas for negative 10 cents a gallon or anything.
Right.
But oil really got hit. That hits their economy. And then what they did is they were preparing for 2020 to have this big world fair in Dubai for almost the entire year. And so they really overbuilt their housing stock in 1919 to prepare for that.
Oh my gosh.
And then COVID comes in and just bam, knockout punch. So, we like to buy when there's blood in the streets. And I think Dubai is interesting right now. So that's why I'm checking it out.
So anyway, we're going to talk about this thing called the Cantalon Effect. Would you explain what that is?
Yeah, so the Cantalon Effect is when governments or central banks print money, it doesn't go to everyone in the population equally. It goes to the insiders, the political insiders.
Amen.
So who would be the political insiders today?
Clintons. The Clintons, it would be the individuals at the World Economic Forum. So if you watch any of their videos, they've got this whole big push for a great reset, where they're calling COVID a quote-unquote opportunity. Those are their words, not mine.
That's what Jane Fonda said last night.
What's that?
Jane Fonda said this is an opportunity. COVID is the best thing that ever happened to them.
Yeah, that's
because now the left can get in and blow out the capitalists.
Yeah, that's basically their push. But these are the insiders that are buddy-buddy with the people, the central bankers, who are printing the money. They're closest to it. So they get it, and it hasn't got out into the economy to create inflation in either consumer prices or assets. So their purchasing power, they get the maximum benefit from this money printing, where by the time it gets down to the average Joe, if it ever does, prices have gone up so much that their purchasing power is less than it was before they printed the money in the first place.
Would you agree there's two things that happen? Is that when it's called crony capitalism?
Absolutely. Yeah, and so corporatism.
You get all this money, the CEOs get it, they buy back the shares of their stock, which is
That's right.
horrifying thing. But meanwhile, the asset prices go up, but mom and pop or the homeless on the street, their consumer price index goes up.
Yeah, that can happen. Or if they do buy assets, they're buying at the top, and the people selling are the insiders that had the money in the first place. They're selling all the way up, right? So in my opinion, and I'm not saying that the quote unquote insiders that we talked about, that group of people, are actually doing this, but if you think about their incentive structure, they would be incentivized for the economy to do poorly and for the economy to actually collapse. They would be incentivized to promote things such as negative interest rates, because what that does is that destroys the banking system or the economy. The more the economy is destroyed, the more money printing the central banks will do. Therefore, the richer the insiders get.
Which explains why the stock market keeps going up, 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 even though people have lost jobs, businesses have shut down, the economy is in the toilet, but the stock market still does great.
Yeah, Kim, I had a great chart the other day in one of my videos where I showed the Buffett indicator. And if you guys don't know, that's the market cap of the stock market compared to GDP, right? And the only time that GDP has ticked down was back in 2008, the GFC in this chart I had. And it went down just slightly, but of course the stock market went down by 50%. Now it's the only time that I've ever seen in history where GDP has collapsed, but the stock market has skyrocketed.
Right.
It's gone the complete opposite direction. So there is no relationship whatsoever between the stock market and the real economy right now.
I like this. This is great time, man. Anyway, we're really honored to have you here, George. It's fantastic. Quick question. Why did Buffett sell his bank shares? Jim Records we just interviewed him, and that was my question. Why is he buying gold? Why is he selling bank shares?
Well, if we really want to go down that rabbit hole, if we look at what we were talking about with the Cantalon Effect, and if he knows the global elites are trying to destroy the banking system by pushing negative interest rates, obviously Buffett wants nothing to do with that.
What do you see the future of banking being?
But I think there's a lot. It's all a game of probabilities. There's no certainties. But I think one probability could be if they start to ban cash, which I think they will, then if you look at the Banking for All Act, that's basically where we have accounts with the Federal Reserve. If we, the people, all have accounts with the Fed, then there's really no need for the banking system. There is no banking system. There is only one central bank. That's it. And so if we kind of take it to its logical conclusion, if the Fed has a balance sheet where basically they can take an infinite haircut, what that means is if the Fed loans you money and you don't pay it back, it doesn't matter. They don't have a profit and loss. So they can start to distribute money. You want to talk about the Cantalon Effect. They can start to distribute it not to whomever they want, but how they want. So instead of giving you a mortgage based on your credit score or your ability to repay the loan. They can do it based on your social score. So if you're not part of...
Did you wear your mask today? Do you have a vaccine shot?
Exactly.
Did you cross the street?
That's right.
Did you bow?
I'm screwed.
You got it.
So
I'm going into hiding.
They're talking about a crypto dollar.
Yeah, basically, it's like a digital.
Thing?
Yeah, it's a digital dollar. So let's think about this. We all have a bank account. We'll just say B of A, Wells Fargo, whatever, and you get your bank statements every single month, and then you reconcile that with QuickBooks or whatever. So now, if we had a bank account with the Fed, then the Federal Reserve or the government would see every single one of your transactions, especially if there was no cash whatsoever. Right? So then every transaction had to go through the Fed or the government. So the amount of power that this would give them is basically unlimited.
That's really totalitarianism, communism, and all that.
I think it's even worse.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's electronic. It's invisible.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that this is happening so lose sleep, but I'm saying you got to start thinking about these things and think how these people and the system itself, what the incentives are to think of potential probabilities, so you can make sure that you're not one of those victims we talked about. You can either be prepared or be a victim. It's your choice.
Right.
Well, you're right on target here. My next book is called The Infinite Returns, and I was talking to Buckminster Fuller. I built the geodesic dome. He says, we are designed to be the architects of the future, not its victim.
Yeah, right.
And so when we come back from this program here, we're going to be talking to George Gammon, like he's one of the hottest guy on social media in the macroeconomics field.
The Rebel Capitalist podcast.
Capitalist show.
The Rebel Capitalist.
But you're my go-to guy when I want to know something. I just scroll through your all your YouTube talks, and if I have a question on something, I just go to you because you'll explain it to me in three simple terms. So when we come back, I want to talk about what a person can do to not be a victim.
Absolutely.
We'll be right back. Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. And the good news is we have the famous George Gammon of the Rebel Capitalist podcast right in our studio with us. Once again, you can listen to the Rich Dad Radio program anytime, anywhere on iTunes or Android and YouTube. And please leave us a review when you listen. And all of our podcasts are archived at richdadradio.com. We archive them because we have nothing to sell but share our information. So if you listen to this program again, and I would strongly recommend it, you'll learn about the Cantalon Effect and homelessness and what's going on in the macro economy. Listen to this again, you'll learn twice as much, but more importantly, listen to this program with friends, family, and business associates and discuss, and your retention rate, your intelligence will skyrocket. Yeah. So we're talking to George Gammon. Before we get into what can a person do, where are you going to hide? I mean, George lives in a wheelie. They keeps him bored pulls behind it.
What I love about George is
like a stick and what was it? The stick and little scarf in the back.
But George and I are on our way, and Kim, we're on our way to Jekyll Island. Now, for those who may not know this, but Jekyll Island is where the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank was so-called started in 1913 on Christmas Eve. And Jekyll Island is infamous, and we're going there for the Red Pill Expo. And the reason we're going is one of my heroes is G. Edward Griffin.
Yeah.
He's the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island. And so we're going to what's called the Red Pill Expo, which is starring Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
And it's about, are you taking the blue pill or the red pill? And most people are on the blue pill. So George and I and Kim will be at Jekyll Island at the Red Pill Expo. If you ever have a chance to go to it, it's worth going to. It'll blow your mind of what we're not being told.
I think today, too, you can go virtually today to the one coming up this weekend, too. If you can't get there in person, you can watch virtually.
Yeah.
So what's your objective for going to the Red Pill with Griffin?
Well, they wanted me to go out there and speak about the Great Reset. We were talking about what the World Economic Forum's agenda that we were referring to earlier. So I'm going to talk about that, and then I'm going to talk about how you can understand what they're doing and leverage that into your own investment portfolio to actually profit from it.
Well, the first time I went, it's my fourth one I'm going to. The first time I went to it, they said the Red Pill Expo was a white supremacist organization.
Oh, jeez.
And I said, I'm not even white. How could I be here?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's how bad the media is. They don't even know what they're reporting on.
I know. Yeah.
But anyway, we're going to be talking about what can I do? You know, I mean, we're talking about how some guys have a Winnebago mobile home ready to go in their driveway in case they have to move quickly. So they don't want to be like in Portland or in the wildfires of California. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
You can get out of Dodge now. So what can a person do? Okay.
And George, let me just ask, you have multiple passports.
No, I'm in the process of getting my Colombian passport. So I've got my residency visa.
Okay.
And so it's kind of the same, but I'm in the process of getting them. I still only have one.
Okay.
Yeah, which is not ideal. I'm doing everything I can to make sure that changes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is that Puerto Rican?
No, Puerto Rican's the same passport, believe it or not.
It seems like another.
I heard you're one of the most wanted in Puerto Rico today because Schiff.
Yeah, well, yeah, I had a bunch of issues there when I went there last. It got really crazy, that's for sure. They're extremely draconian about this whole process with the virus, and definitely not the type of personal liberty and freedom that I like.
But then you say countries like around Russia who have experienced socialism and worse, they're saying we want nothing to do with this. We want capitalism.
Yeah, that's right. And there's a very anti-free market capitalist tone in the United States, to say the least.
Yeah.
To say the least.
You know, when I say that, people say you don't know what you're talking about. I say, man, I can feel it.
Oh yeah,
I can feel it, man.
It's a lot different. I mean, even when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, it's just the whole vibe is totally changed. Not just with that, but with everything. And I think those countries that you mentioned, they want nothing to do with it. So although they might be not as free now,
right.
I think you have to look at the trajectory of where countries are going in the future.
This is what cracks me up, is that all the people that want socialism, the people coming into the U.S. are running from socialism.
Yeah, right.
Do you know what I mean? And Americans will say, hey, welcome, welcome.
Yeah.
Because they have no idea what it is.
Yeah, they don't. If they had firsthand experience, a great example of that is a lot of people that work for me in Colombia with my real estate business, they're from Venezuela. And they fled Venezuela.
Right.
So I mean, they watch my videos, and they absolutely love them. And they see some of the comments, or they see some of the things I talk about, where people are actually promoting these socialist and Marxist ideas, and it actually pisses them off. I mean, they get like angry because of what they experienced in Venezuela and having to flee and leave everything behind. And it really gets them going. That's rightfully so.
So what could somebody do today to prepare versus become a victim?
Well, a lot of things. If we're talking about from a financial standpoint, I think you have to look at commodities because they're extremely cheap right now, historically speaking. If you
talking
look
about gold and silver right now.
And oil and uranium and copper, things like that, agriculture. If you look at commodities as a whole, relative to stocks or financial assets, we're at an all-time low going all the way back to 1900. So that's, again, we like to buy things when they're cheap.
How do you buy commodities? Because Kim and I just buy the physical.
Yeah, you can just buy producers. So as an example, if you've got, coal is another commodity, believe it or not, that I actually like. A funny story about that is I tweeted.
The environmentalists must love you, man, I tell you.
Well, listen, I'm not
Can't
here
please
to.
everybody.
I'm not here to debate that. It's just about.
He's just here to make a buck.
Yeah,
George
if you want to make money,
George
you
isn't
gotta,
running in a popularity contest.
Yeah, exactly. But a quick trivia question. I think you guys will enjoy this. And I posted this on Twitter the other day. So since 1968, what do you think is the best performing stock in the entire stock market since 1968?
I'm going to guess because of your lead-in, it's going to be coal-based.
No. Altria, tobacco, cigarettes.
Seriously?
That's right. And the best performing sector in the best performing sector in the stock market since the mid-1990s has been tobacco. Most people would never ever know that. So what I'm trying to think through on my own now is if you look at the attitude that everyone's had towards tobacco, since the mid-1990s, it's the exact same thing with coal now. So maybe coal is the new tobacco. And we look at it just from a standpoint of energy, but people forget that coal is a large component of steel. So if you're bullish on the emerging markets developing like China and India did, then you've got to be bullish coal.
Well, there's something else, about tobacco. I was reading the stats on deaths. And just before 2020 started, the estimated death rate for cancer was 606,000 Americans. And so far, coronavirus has only killed 200,000.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So they say.
Do
Probably
you know what I mean?
a lot
It's
less.
so. When you look at the numbers, you kind of wonder what's going on. That's what I do.
Yeah, well, as human beings, we're extremely irrational, and that's what makes us so poor investors.
Right.
So we've got to try to eliminate that emotion from the equation and just look at the statistics and invest within a framework. But as far as what else people can do outside of investing and looking at things that are cheap and like commodities, that, by the way, will do extremely well in an inflationary environment if the Fed and the government keep creating money just out of thin air. But I think they can look around where they live and say, is my state going in the direction I want it to go? And if not, maybe I should look at a different state where they've got some ideas that are more aligned with what I think is right. And then lastly, let's just say that you're someone that has to live in California because, they're the poster child right now for doing stupid stuff. Well, at the very least, you could have an RV, and we talked about this, just in your driveway. It sounds kind of silly, but look, if you've got riots coming through and you've got a little RV and a diesel truck in your driveway with some food, you can just grab your family, hop in there, go up to Tahoe or wherever, and just ride it out for a couple weeks and then go back when you feel like it. It just gives you those options, and there's no downside to it. It's like our friend Simon Black says, there's what's your downside to having a plan B?
Yep. It's interesting because we have a kind of a rustic resort up in Sedona.
Yeah.
And all the hotels have been shut down all over the place. Well, we opened because exactly what you're saying. People wanted to get out of the cities. They were driving. They were not flying.
Mm-hmm.
They were driving from anywhere from Utah, Idaho to Sedona to get away from all the craziness.
Yeah. Same thing in St. Bart's. When I was in St. Bart's, it's a little different level there, but 90% of the people that I met were just there because they're like, listen, I see what's going on in the States. I want out. I want nothing to do with it. And a lot of people were there from California.
I don't doubt that. Yeah.
What's your crystal ball say about the old-time social programs like Social Security and Medicare, and then all the pensions? Because, my pessimistic ball says they ain't going to be there.
Yeah, I think they'll probably be there, but you won't be able to buy anything with your Social Security check. So yes, in nominal terms, you'll get your $2,000 or $3,000 a month, but it'll buy you a loaf of bread because they're going to print and create so much money to make them whole, and it trickles down. It goes into inflation. It drives up consumer prices, especially if you have this move towards socialism, Marxism, or even anti-capitalism. You have to think through what that does. That reduces the amount of supply the amount of goods and services in the economy. That reduces supply. So if you have a reduced amount of supply and a greater amount of money chasing those goods and services, you have inflation going straight up. So I think you'll be made whole, but you're not going to be able to purchase anything with that pension or that Social Security check.
When you say socialism, communism, or anti-capitalism, I always think of socialism and communism as anti-capitalism.
Yeah.
Is there a difference?
Well, I think a lot of people in the United States wouldn't consider themselves a socialist or a communist, but
they are.
But they're very anti-free market capitalism.
Okay.
They're for big government. They're for a tops-down type of approach, and that's to me that although you might not fit those first two categories, you definitely fit that third category.
So what else would you like to say to people about preparing? Because Kim and I have been preparing for years and years and years and years and years, and it's nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that you've got to own some gold. And I know you talk about this all the time, but I think that's where gold and Bitcoin fit into the equation.
How about you? I mean, I saw you finally endorse Bitcoin. Not really.
Well, I don't know if I endorse it.
Jumped all over that one.
Yeah, I just look at them as two completely separate asset classes with two different purposes, right? I think that gold is there as an insurance policy just to protect your purchasing power. So I always say you buy gold not to get rich, but to stay rich. And then Bitcoin is more of a speculation, or you've got some asymmetry there, probably a lot more upside than you have downside. So that's kind of, and it's a unique. Those are unique assets in that they don't have any counterparty risk. And see, that's very important when you're in the everything bubble.
Right. So the point here is this: like guys like Max Kaiser, they're so hardcore. There's only one thing is called Bitcoin.
Yeah.
They're hardcore, and I get a little spooked.
Yeah.
And
you put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, I don't think that's good.
I spoke. Oh, go ahead.
My question is, and I've asked every Bitcoin fanatic on our program, why can't I just do it myself? Have you asked, why can't I just mine Bitcoin by myself?
Yeah.
Have you ever wondered that? I mean, not that I could. I can barely use my
a
cell phone.
A cryptocurrency. A cryptocurrency.
Or why can't you create a cryptocurrency?
Yeah,
I mean, you can.
That's what I think.
You absolutely can. They just have the network effect is probably what they would argue, and that you're not going to be able to create something as sophisticated as Bitcoin. But I think there's just as much to be excited about with the technology behind it and blockchain. It's just, again, you're comparing apples and oranges there if you look at those things compared to gold. I think the main thing, though, is we've got to figure out a way to limit the ability for the central planners to create more currency. That's what it's about. And if you look at the gold guys, the Bitcoin guys, we're all on the same team here.
Right.
And that's limiting the central planners from creating all of those currency units that trickle down and play into the Cantalon Effect.
How does that happen? How does that happen?
Well, as an example, with Bitcoin, there's only 21 million of them. So if we went onto, let's say, a Bitcoin standard, I'm not saying this is what we're doing.
Right.
I'm just let's go through a thought experiment. Well, that would prevent the Jerome Powell from coming in and taking his balance sheet from 4 trillion to 7 trillion. That would prevent, and not only that, but see, a lot of people on the left say, oh, well, yeah, that's terrible because we can't do these social programs. But what they forget is it would also make it harder for the governments to go to war.
Interesting.
Right? Something we should all be in favor of.
Why is that? Why would it be harder?
Because they can't print the money. So the only way that they could, the only way they could go to war is if they actually tax the citizens first. And so if we're not on board with them going to war, we're like, no, I'm not paying for that.
So my final question, what drives you? I mean, like you retired at 38 and we retired, Kim was 37, I was 47. But something drives us. It's not the money of this. I mean, the money's always interesting, but what drives you? What's your motivation? I
think I enjoy challenge for sure. Like when I started the YouTube channel, even I was just obsessing over that just as much as I obsess over macro. And that's one of the things that interests me about macro, is just trying to figure out that 10-dimensional puzzle and trying to what's going to happen next. And it's that challenge. And when we started the YouTube channel, although it was never about just making it the biggest, I would never really admit that. But in the back of my mind, I'm very competitive, and I'm like, okay, what do we do to get more views? What do we do to do this? What do we do? So it's that. I was an athlete growing up, so I think it has something to do with that. But I think the pursuit of more personal freedom and always being challenged, that drives me.
That's a good
But don't
quest.
you find that the more you do it, the more you share, the more you learn, the more freedom you have?
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of this whole thing.
I mean, and let's look at this weekend with the Red Pill Expo. Now I have the opportunity to go there and hang out with you guys and meet all these other cool speakers. And that never would have happened unless I would have pushed myself to get outside of my comfort zone and challenged myself by putting myself out there and making often a fool of myself in all these YouTube videos.
As we all have. As we all have, George.
So anyway, George, it's an honor to have you come by and visit the little Rich Dad company here.
It's an honor to be here.
We've been shut down for a while. Everybody's been social distanced.
But we're back. And I have to tell you, being social distance, everybody working from home, oh my God, this team is so tight and so hot. We've been more effective, more productive than ever before.
That's great.
It's just amazing. So it's opened up all sorts of opportunities as a team of what we can do together. So there is good that's coming out of COVID, but for your point about wanting more and more and more freedom and not losing liberties and not losing our freedoms, that's what we stand for.
Absolutely.
So thank you for what you do.
Anyway, with that, George, thank you. Congratulations on all your success. Thanks for stopping by. And thank you all for listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show.